My name is Isaiah Holloway, and I am 70 years old. My whole life I believed that if you worked hard and raised your children right, you'd earn a peaceful old age. I was wrong. Last week my son Andre took me to a fancy pub. When he stepped away to take a call, the young bartender leaned in close, his eyes wide with fear. He told me my son wasn't on a call. He told me where Andre really was and who he was meeting. 5 minutes later I was climbing out of a bathroom window, my old bones screaming in protest. What I saw in that dark alley broke my heart. And then it filled me with a cold, hard resolve. Before I tell you what happened next, please tell me in the comments where you're listening to my story from. And hit that like and subscribe button if you believe a person's dignity is worth fighting for, no matter their age. My visit started 2 days earlier when I first stepped into my son's kitchen. It was the cleanest place I'd ever seen. And I don't mean that in a good way. It was sterile. Everything was either stark white or cold gray, from the marble countertops that looked like they had never seen a crumb to the silent stainless steel refrigerator that stood like a tombstone. There wasn't a single family photo on its surface, not one colorful magnet from a vacation. It felt more like a showroom in a magazine than a place where people actually lived, where they cooked meals that smelled like home. I sat on a tall, uncomfortable stool, feeling like my old work boots were a stain on the polished floor. My daughter-in-law, Brooke, was arranging a salad on a plate. It looked like a piece of modern art. A few green leaves, a few slices of avocado, a sprinkle of some kind of seeds. She wasn't preparing to eat it. She was taking pictures of it with her phone, turning the plate this way and that to catch the perfect light. "You have to capture the authenticity of the moment," she said to the air, her eyes glued to the screen. People online crave what's real. I wondered what was real about a $20 salad nobody was going to eat. I looked down at my own hands, at the calluses and scars from 50 years of working with wood and steel. That was real. Andre walked in, then holding 2 glasses of wine. He set one down in front of me. "Try this, Dad. It's a French red," he said. "Not like that cheap stuff you usually drink." I just gently pushed the glass away. My wife Annette never liked alcohol in the house after her father's troubles. Andre knew that. Maybe he forgot. Or maybe he just didn't care anymore. "So Dad, tell Brooke one of your old stories," Andre said, trying to fill the dead air. "Tell her about how you built the wood shop yourself from the ground up." I started to tell it the real story. About the early days, about having to salvage scrap lumber from construction sites because we couldn't afford to buy new. I told her about the night a storm nearly tore the roof off and how Annette and I stayed up all night with buckets and tarps fighting to save it. These were my memories, the foundation of our family. And then my old friend Henderson, he loaned me $500 with nothing more than a handshake. Andre cut in immediately with a forced little laugh. "What Dad means is he presented a solid business plan and secured initial funding from an angel investor who believed in his vision." He turned to Brooke and winked. "My dad can be a little too humble sometimes." I fell silent. He wasn't just rephrasing my words, he was rewriting my past. He was scrubbing away the poverty, the struggle, the kindness of friends, and turning my life into something clean and shiny for his new world. "I'm just glad you finally sold the place." Andre continued, changing the subject. "It was a burden. Now you can finally relax and enjoy your retirement." A burden. He called my wife's legacy, the place that held 40 years of our sweat and laughter, a burden. My chest felt tight. I looked at my son, trying to see the little boy who used to run around that shop, his hair covered in sawdust. But he was gone. In his place was a stranger who spoke a language of money and appearances I didn't understand. After dinner, after Brooke went upstairs to do what she called her evening meditation, Andre placed a thick stack of papers on the table in front of me. The sharp smell of new paper and printer ink filled the air. "What's this?" I asked. "Just some investment paperwork, Dad," he said, his voice a little too smooth. "I spoke with my financial advisor. They have a fantastic portfolio for retirees. 0 risk, steady returns. It'll make sure you're set for life with nothing to worry about." He pulled out an expensive-looking pen and flipped the stack to the very last page, tapping a finger on a blank line next to my printed name. "You just need to sign right here. I'll handle the rest." I looked at the documents. There had to be 30 pages easy, filled with tiny print and legal terms I'd never seen before. "Let me read it first," I said, reaching for the stack. A flash of annoyance crossed Andre's face. His smile vanished. "Dad, you don't need to do that. It's complicated stuff. I've already read it all. It's good for you, I promise." "Son," I said, and my voice was low and steady. "I haven't signed a single thing without reading it first in 70 years. I'm not about to start now." A new kind of silence filled the room. It wasn't just awkward anymore. It was heavy. I could feel his impatience, his frustration rolling off him in waves. He was hiding something. An honest man is never in a hurry. He let out a long, frustrated sigh. "Fine," he said, standing up. "But don't take too long. Good opportunities don't wait around forever." He turned and walked out of the room, leaving me alone with the papers and a cold feeling of dread that was just beginning to take root in my gut. To make up for the tension, or so he claimed, Andre took me to a pub down the street. It wasn't a real pub, not like the ones I knew where sawdust covered the floor and the bartender knew your name. This place was dark and sleek with soft music that sounded like a slow heartbeat. The air smelled of expensive perfume and whiskey that cost more per glass than I used to make in a day. Young people were everywhere, all dressed in sharp clothes, their faces lit by the blue glow of their phones. They didn't laugh loudly. They murmured their conversations, sounding like secrets about stock prices and weekend trips I could never imagine. I felt like a ghost from another time, a black and white photograph in a world of dazzling digital color. I watched a young man no older than Andre was when he left for college show off a watch on his wrist. That watch probably cost more than the down payment on my first house, the house where I raised the man who was now sitting uncomfortably beside me. Andre ordered me a fancy cranberry juice with a sprig of something green in it. He didn't ask what I wanted, he just assumed. He kept glancing at his phone, his thumb swiping nervously across the screen. He wasn't here with me, not really. His mind was 1,000 miles away. After about 5 minutes of this strained silence, his phone buzzed. He looked down at it with a sense of relief that was almost insulting. "Ah, shoot," he said, standing up. "It's work. A big client from overseas. I have to take this. It's important." He didn't wait for my response. He just squeezed my shoulder with a hand that felt disconnected and hurried toward the door. "I'll be right back," he called over his shoulder. But I knew he wouldn't. I was left alone at the polished bar, a 70-year-old man in a flannel shirt surrounded by a world I didn't belong to, abandoned by my own son. The fancy juice tasted bitter in my mouth. I sat there for a long time watching the ice in my glass melt. The low thrum of the music and the murmur of conversations faded into a dull buzz. I felt a presence beside me and turned to see the bartender. He was a young man, maybe 25, with quick, intelligent eyes. He was wiping down the counter with a clean cloth, but he wasn't looking at the counter. He was looking at me. He had been looking at me ever since I sat down. "Excuse me, sir," he said, his voice quiet, respectful. "I don't mean to bother you, but are you Mr. Holloway, Isaiah Holloway?" I was taken aback. Nobody in this part of town knew my name. I was just Andre's old father, a relic from a past he was trying to bury. "I am," I said, my voice cautious. "How do you know me?" The young man put his cloth down. He leaned a little closer, and the practiced professional smile he gave the other customers vanished. It was replaced by something genuine, something real. "My name is Leo," he said. My mother is Maria. She used to work at the laundromat on 8th Street years ago. You and your wife, Mrs. Annette Holloway, you used to come in every Saturday." The name of my wife, spoken in this cold, unfamiliar place, was like a sudden warmth spreading through my chest. Annette. It had been 2 years since I lost her, but sometimes the grief was still as sharp as broken glass. I remembered Maria, a quiet woman who worked harder than anyone I'd ever met. "I remember your mother," I said, my voice softening. "A good woman." "How is she?" Leo smiled, a real smile this time. It reached his eyes. "She's good. She's retired now. She still talks about Mrs. Holloway all the time." He paused and his expression grew more serious. "I was just a kid, but I remember one winter. I got a bad case of pneumonia. My mom couldn't afford the medicine and was terrified of losing her job if she took time off. Your wife found out somehow. She showed up at our apartment one afternoon with a bag full of groceries and the medicine from the pharmacy. She told my mom not to worry about work for a week. She just helped. She never asked for anything back. She never told anyone." He looked down at the counter, then back at me. "My mother never forgot that. I never forgot that. Mrs. Holloway. She was one of the good ones." Hearing him speak about Annette with such reverence, such gratitude, It was like a drink of cool water after a long walk in the desert. It reminded me of the world that Andre had left behind, a world where kindness wasn't a transaction, where people looked out for each other. It was the world Annette and I had built our lives in. For the first time all day, I didn't feel like a ghost. I felt like Isaiah Holloway again. I felt like Annette's husband. I was still lost in the warmth of that memory when Leo's demeanor shifted. The friendly light in his eyes vanished, replaced by a sharp, urgent focus. He glanced quickly over his shoulder as if checking for spies. The casual way he had been polishing a glass became tense, his movements suddenly clipped and deliberate. He put the glass down with a soft click that sounded like a gunshot in the quiet space that had formed around us. Then he did something that startled me. He reached across the bar and grabbed my forearm. His grip wasn't hard, but it was firm, demanding my full attention. "Listen to me, Mr. Holloway," he whispered, his voice so low I had to lean in to hear him over the music. "You have to listen carefully." All I could do was nod, my heart starting to beat a little faster. "Your son, Andre? He's not on a business call," Leo said, his words coming out in a rush. "He's not talking to any client." The words hung in the air, confusing. I started to ask what he meant, but he squeezed my arm, silencing me. "He's in the alley." Out back, Leo continued, his eyes darting toward a door marked "Staff Only." "He's with a man in a suit. A man who looks like he breaks things for a living. I've seen them before. This is the third time this month." My mind was struggling to catch up. An alley. A man in a suit. It made no sense. But then Leo delivered the final blow. "They're not talking about investments, Mr. Holloway. I heard them last week. They were loud. They're talking about your house. About selling your house. And your son." He sounded scared. The world tilted on its axis. The warmth from Annette's memory evaporated, replaced by a chill that went straight to my bones. The paperwork. The rush to get me to sign. Andre's frustration when I said I wanted to read it. It all crashed together in my mind, forming a single ugly picture. My son wasn't trying to help me. He was trying to take from me. The low hum of the pub faded away until all I could hear was the frantic pounding of my own heart. I looked at Leo and he saw the understanding in my eyes. He gave my arm one last firm squeeze and then let go, picking up his cloth and moving away as if nothing had happened. But everything had happened. Everything had changed. My mind was a whirlwind, but my body knew exactly what to do. I couldn't go back out there. Andre would see the truth on my face, the betrayal that felt like a physical wound. I stood up, leaving the untouched juice on the bar, and walked toward the restrooms with a steady gait I did not feel. I didn't stumble. I didn't look back. Inside, the room was small and thankfully empty. There was one stall, one sink, and a small frosted glass window high up on the back wall. It was the kind of window meant for ventilation, not escape. But tonight it was my only way out. My heart hammered against my ribs, but my mind was strangely calm. The old man who walked into this pub was gone. A different man was here now, a man fueled by a cold, burning anger. I dragged the heavy trash can under the window. It smelled sour, but I didn't care. I climbed onto it, my knees screaming in protest. The latch was stiff with rust and paint. For a moment I thought I wouldn't be able to open it. I put all my weight into it, my knuckles scraping against the frame. It gave way with a painful screech. Cold night air hit my face. I pulled myself up, my muscles straining. Every groan from my joints was a protest, but the fire in my gut was stronger than the pain. For a moment I was stuck half in and half out, a ridiculous sight for anyone to see. Then I pushed through and tumbled out, landing hard on the damp pavement of the alley. I lay there for a second, the shock rattling my bones, before scrambling to my feet. I had to know. I had to see it with my own eyes. The next morning, I was the first one up. But I didn't get out of bed. When Andre knocked on my door, I waited a long moment before answering, and when I did, I made my voice sound weak, thin. "I'm not feeling so great, son," I said, forcing a cough. "I think I'll just rest today. My old bones are telling me to slow down." Through the door, I heard him pause. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head. Then his voice came back, layered with a fake concern that was as thin as old paint. "Oh, of course, Dad. You just stay in bed. Brooke and I will bring you some breakfast." I didn't want their breakfast. I didn't want their concern. What I wanted was for them to leave the house so I could think. An hour later, Brooke came in with a tray. It held a small bowl of oatmeal and a glass of orange juice. "We're so worried about you, Ike," she said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "It's important to listen to your body at your age." At my age. The words were meant to sound caring, but now I heard them for what they were: a dismissal. They were a way of saying I was fragile, unreliable, perhaps even a little senile. I played my part. I took a few small bites of the oatmeal and told her it was delicious, even though it tasted like wallpaper paste. Andre came to the doorway, already dressed in a suit that probably cost $1,000. "Just take it easy today, Dad," he said. "Don't you worry about a thing, especially not those complicated papers. I told you I'd handle everything." He smiled, but his eyes were sharp, analytical. He was watching me, gauging my reaction. Every word he spoke now had a double meaning. Take it easy meant don't get suspicious. Don't worry meant don't think too hard. And I'll handle everything was a threat. I just nodded slowly, looking down at my bowl. "Thank you, son," I murmured. "I'm lucky to have you looking out for me." The lie felt like poison on my tongue, but I swallowed it down. I had to. It was the only way I could find out just how deep this betrayal went. As soon as I heard the front door click shut, my act was over. I wasn't a tired old man anymore. I was a hunter, and my prey had just left the house. My hands were shaking, but my mind was clear. There was only one person I could trust. I found my old tablet, the one Andre had given me for Christmas 2 years ago, telling me it would help me stay connected. I had barely used it, but I knew how to make a call. I found her number in my contacts and pressed the button. The phone rang twice before she picked up. Her voice was just as I remembered it, strong, sharp, and with no room for nonsense. "Imani Vance speaking." "Imani," I said, my own voice sounding raspy. "It's Ike. Ike Holloway." There was a brief pause on the other end, and then her tone warmed instantly. "Ike, good Lord, it's been too long. How are you holding up, old man?" We hadn't spoken since Annette's funeral. Imani and my wife had been friends for decades back, since they were both young women fighting for community projects in our neighborhood. Imani had become a lawyer, a fierce one, but she never forgot where she came from. "I'm holding on, Imani. But I need your help," I said, getting straight to the point. "It's about Andre." The warmth in her voice was replaced by a professional focus. "What's he done?" I took a deep breath. "He wants me to sign some papers. He calls them investment papers, says they're to secure my retirement." I looked at the thick stack of documents on the nightstand. It felt like a snake coiled and waiting. But he was in a hurry, Imani, a real hurry, and something just doesn't feel right about it. I didn't tell her about the pub or the alley or Leo, not yet. I needed facts first. Imani was silent for a moment, processing. She knew me. She knew I wasn't a man who panicked over nothing. "Okay, Ike," she said, her voice all business now. "Don't you sign a single thing. Do you hear me? Not even your name on a napkin. Can you get those papers to me?" "How?" I asked. "I can't exactly walk out of here and mail them." "Does that son of yours still have you using that tablet I told you to get?" she asked. "Yes," I replied. "Good. The camera on that thing is better than you think. I'm going to text you my private email address. I want you to take a clear picture of every single page of that document. Every page, Ike. Make sure the corners are flat and the lighting is good. Then email them to me. Can you do that?" It sounded complicated, but the determination in her voice gave me strength. This was something I could do. A concrete action. "I can do that," I said. "Good man," she replied. "Get them to me as soon as you can. I'll clear my schedule. And Ike, be careful. If your gut is telling you something is wrong, you listen to it. Your gut has been right for 70 years. We hung up, and a moment later a message with her email address appeared on my screen. I took the stack of papers, and with hands that were surprisingly steady, I began my work. One by one, I laid each page flat on the bedspread using the bedside lamp for light, and took a picture. The whole time I felt like a spy in my own son's house, and the thought was a bitter pill to swallow. But I kept going. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about protecting the home Annette and I had built, the legacy we were supposed to leave behind. After I sent the last picture, the silence of the house crashed down on me. It was a different kind of silence now. Before it had been awkward. Now it was heavy with secrets. Waiting for Imani to call was the hardest part. I couldn't just sit in that guest room staring at the walls. I had to move. I went downstairs to the kitchen to get a glass of water, my stocking feet silent on the cold, polished floor. I opened a drawer looking for a simple glass, not one of the fragile wine goblets they used. It was a junk drawer, the kind every house has, but theirs was neat organized, full of batteries, rubber bands, takeout menus, and underneath it all a stack of envelopes held together by a thick rubber band. My hand hesitated for only a second before I picked them up. They weren't junk mail. They were from credit card companies, from a car dealership, from a private lending group I'd never heard of. I carefully slid the top one out. The words were printed in stark red ink. Final notice. My blood ran cold. I slid another one out. Past due. Another. Immediate payment required. It was a stack of shame, a testament to a life lived on borrowed money and borrowed time. This perfect house wasn't a home. It was a stage. And the props were all fake. I put the letters back exactly as I had found them and closed the drawer. My eyes scanned the living room, but now I was seeing it differently. I saw the large, colorful painting on the wall. From a distance it looked impressive, but as I got closer I saw that it wasn't a painting at all. It was a print, the kind you buy online, stretched over a frame to look like the real thing. There was no texture, no life to it. I walked over to the bookshelf where Brooke kept one of her expensive-looking handbags on display like a piece of art. I picked it up. My whole life I worked with my hands. I know the feel of quality materials. I know the weight and smell of real leather. This wasn't it. It felt thin, plasticky, and lifeless. It was a cheap imitation, a lie designed to impress people who didn't know any better. I saw Andre's fancy watch sitting on his desk in the small office nook. I picked it up. It was light, too light. It felt hollow, like a toy. Everything from the art on the walls to the watch on his wrist was a carefully constructed illusion. My son wasn't just in a little trouble. He was drowning. He and his wife were living in a house of cards, and they were about to pull my own house, the only real thing we had left, down with them. Just then, my tablet vibrated on the kitchen counter. It was Imani. My heart leaped into my throat. The time for waiting was over. The time for answers had come. I picked up the tablet on the first buzz. My own reflection looked back at me from the dark screen, a tired old man with fear in his eyes. I swiped the screen and put it to my ear. "Imani Ike," she said. Her voice was flat. All the warmth from our earlier call was gone. It had been replaced by something hard and cold like steel. "I've read every page, Ike. I've read it twice." I held my breath. I could hear the rustle of papers on her end. "Your son is a liar," she said, and there was no kindness in her words, only a brutal, chilling honesty. "These are not investment documents. There is no portfolio for retirees. There is no fund to secure your future. It's all a lie, Ike, a complete and utter fabrication." The floor seemed to drop out from under me. I had to grab the edge of the kitchen counter to steady myself. What is it then?" I stammered. "It's a quitclaim deed." "Ike," she said, and she pronounced the words slowly, precisely, like a judge handing down a death sentence. "Do you know what that is?" "No," I whispered. "It means you are signing away your property. You are giving your house, the house you and Annette poured your lives into, to Andre. Voluntarily. For the sum of $1. It's buried on page 17 in a paragraph so full of legal jargon it's designed to make your eyes glaze over. It's a trick, Ike. A trap. The oldest, cruelest trick in the book." I couldn't speak. My throat was tight. My lungs felt empty. My house. Annette's garden. The porch swing where we sat on summer nights. The walls that had held all our laughter and all our tears. He was trying to steal it all. "Once you sign this, Ike, it's done." Imani's voice cut through the fog in my head. "It's legally binding. You would be willingly giving him everything. You would have no home, no assets, nothing. He could put you out on the street the next day and there would be nothing I could do to stop him. He is not trying to secure your future, Ike. He is trying to steal it to pay for his own." I sank onto one of the cold, hard kitchen stools. The beautiful, sterile room seemed to spin around me. I thought of Andre as a little boy crying in my arms after he fell off his bike. I thought of the pride I felt at his college graduation. I thought of all the sacrifices Annette and I had made for him, all the love we had poured into him. And this was how he was repaying us. This was his gratitude. The shock was so profound it went past sadness, past heartbreak. It settled deep in my bones as a cold, heavy stillness. The kind of stillness that comes before a hurricane. Imani was still talking, telling me about legal options, about what we could do next. but I wasn't really listening anymore. I was looking at my reflection in the black screen of the tablet. The fear was gone from the old man's eyes. It had been replaced by something else, something hard, something unforgiving. The storm had arrived. When they returned home that evening, the psychological war began. It didn't start with a loud battle, but with quiet, insidious little attacks designed to make me doubt my own mind. I was sitting in the living room reading a book when Andre walked in. "Hey, Dad, just wanted to let you know I put your keys in the ceramic bowl by the door," he said, his tone casual. "That way you'll always know where they are. Don't want you misplacing them." I hadn't misplaced them. They had been on the small table right beside my chair where I always put them. He had moved them. It was a small thing, a tiny shift in my environment, but it was a message: I am in control here. You are not. The next day it escalated. At breakfast, I mentioned that I needed to call my old neighbor George to check on his wife. Brooke looked at Andre with an expression of deep, exaggerated concern. "Ike, honey," she said, her voice dripping with pity. "Don't you remember Andre told you yesterday? George's wife passed away 6 months ago. We were so worried about how you'd take the news." I stared at them. I had spoken to George just last week. His wife Martha was fine. She had just won second place in the local baking competition. But they both looked at me with such convincing sympathy, such gentle sadness, that for a split second a terrible, dizzying wave of doubt washed over me. Did I imagine the phone call? Was my mind playing tricks on me? I saw a flicker of triumph in Andre's eyes before he masked it with a sigh. "It's okay, Dad," he said, patting my hand. "Memory gets tricky. We're here for you." They were trying to build a cage around my mind, and the bars were made of my own self-doubt. They started hiding things. My reading glasses would vanish from the nightstand and reappear inside the refrigerator. My wallet would be missing from my jacket pocket, only for Brooke to find it in the sugar bowl. Each time they would exchange worried glances and treat me like a child who couldn't be trusted. The most vicious attack, however, came from Brooke's phone. That evening, I saw her typing furiously, a sad little smile on her face. A few hours later, my tablet buzzed with a notification. A friend from my old neighborhood had shared a post from Brooke's public page. There was a picture of me taken that morning when I wasn't looking. I was sitting by the window and the light caught me in a way that made me look tired, lost. The caption beneath it was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive cruelty. "It's one of the hardest journeys a family can go on," she wrote. "Caring for a parent who is slowly fading away. Some days are clearer than others. We cherish every lucid moment, every memory he can still hold on to. It's heartbreaking to watch the man who was once so strong become confused by the simplest things, but we are facing it with love and patience. So grateful for my amazing husband for being a rock during this difficult time." She finished it with a string of hashtags: elder care, #family journey, #dementia, awareness, #love my pops, #staying strong. She was painting a public narrative. She was telling the world that Isaiah Holloway was losing his mind. She was creating a story that would make anyone, even a judge, question my competence. Any protest I made would just look like a symptom of the very confusion she was describing. I read the post, and a rage so pure and so cold filled me that it burned away any remaining sadness. They weren't just trying to steal my house. They were trying to steal my identity. They were trying to erase me, to turn me into a feeble-minded old man before I was even gone. I closed the tablet. I looked across the room where they sat watching TV, looking like the perfect caring family, and I let a slightly confused, vacant expression settle on my face. If they wanted me to be a forgetful old man, then that's exactly what I would be. I would play their game. I would be the best damn confused old man they had ever seen. And from inside my cage of their making, I would find a way to tear their whole world apart. I leaned into their narrative. I embraced the role they had written for me. The next morning I came downstairs and asked Brooke what day it was. "It's Wednesday, Ike," she said patiently, as if speaking to a toddler. I nodded, poured myself a cup of coffee, and sat down at the table. 5 minutes later I looked up from my cup and asked Andre-san, "What day is it today?" He and Brooke exchanged a look. It was a look of confirmation, of shared victory. Their theory about my fading mind was proving correct. "It's Wednesday," Dad Andre said, his voice slow and gentle. "Just like Brooke told you." I looked down at the table, feigning confusion. "Oh. Right. Of course." Inside, I was a coiled spring. Every condescending word, every pitying glance was fuel. They thought they were building a cage, but they were actually handing me a key. A forgetful old man is invisible. He is harmless. He is someone you can talk freely in front of because you assume he won't understand or remember. And so I became invisible. I started talking to myself, just quiet little mumbles. I would stand in the middle of a room for a full minute looking around as if I had forgotten why I came in. I spent an afternoon trying to figure out their complicated television remote, pressing the wrong buttons, making the screen flash strange colors until Andre came over with a long-suffering sigh and put on a nature channel for me. "Here you go, Dad," he'd said, nice and simple. As I sat there pretending to be captivated by a show about migrating birds, I was actually listening. I listened to their hushed phone calls about interest rates. I listened to Brooke complaining about the cost of their upcoming trip to Aspen. I listened to Andre on a call with the man from the alley telling him, just a few more days. My father he's not all there. It's just a matter of finding the right moment. They were getting sloppy. Their confidence was making them careless. They saw a frail old man in a chair, but they didn't see the man inside. They didn't see the man who was piecing together their desperation, their lies, their weaknesses. I shuffled when I walked. I spilled a little coffee and looked down at the stain with wide, innocent eyes. I let my mouth hang open just a little when I was watching TV. I became a ghost in their house, a piece of furniture they had to navigate around, and all the while I was watching, listening, waiting. I was no longer just the victim of their scheme. I had become a part of it. I was the fool in their play, and I was going to make damn sure that my performance was convincing enough to lead them straight to their own ruin. They thought my mind was a blank page. They had no idea I was using it to write their final act. The nights were the hardest. The house would fall completely silent around midnight, but I would lie awake for hours, my mind racing. On the third night of my performance, I waited until I heard the soft click of their bedroom door followed by the low hum of the air conditioning. I gave them another hour just to be sure. Then silently, I slipped out of bed. The tablet was on the nightstand, its screen a black mirror. It felt alien in my hands, a device from Andre's world. But tonight, it was my only tool, my only weapon. I crept into the guest bathroom, closed the door without making a sound, and sat on the edge of the tub. The dim glow of the screen was the only light. I didn't know the name of the man in the suit from the alley, so I started with what I knew. I typed in Andre's name and the name of his financial firm. The first result was the company website. It was glossy and professional, full of smiling photos of Andre and his partner's testimonials from happy clients and promises of secure growth and financial freedom. It was the public face, the beautiful, meticulously crafted lie. I knew the truth was buried deeper. I opened a new search tab. This time I typed in Andre's name again, but I added other words. Words I had overheard, words I suspected. Debt. Lawsuit. Investment loss. Complaint. For a long time I found nothing. Just more articles praising his firm, more links to his perfect social media profiles. It was like a digital fortress. But I was patient. I spent 50 years learning how to find the weak spot in a piece of wood. I would find the weak spot here too. I kept scrolling page after page, digging deeper into the search results past the polished surface. And then I found it. It was a link to an obscure online forum for investors. The post was 2 years old. The headline was simple, "Warning about Holloway Financial Group." My heart started to beat faster. I clicked the link. A user, a man who sounded like a retired teacher, wrote about how he had lost his entire pension in a high-risk tech fund that Andre's firm had recommended. He called Andre a smooth talker, a predator who targeted older clients. The post ended with a question, "Has anyone else been burned by this guy?" Underneath there were dozens of replies, story after story, a widow who lost her husband's life insurance, a young couple who lost their down payment for a house. It was a graveyard of broken dreams, all leading back to my son. I searched for the name of the fund they all mentioned. More results appeared. Articles about its sudden collapse. Accusations of mismanagement. This wasn't a small mistake. This was a catastrophe. In one of the longest threads, a user mentioned what happened after the fund collapsed. He wrote about the aggressive lenders who started offering rescue loans to the desperate investors who had lost everything. He mentioned one company in particular, a company with a name that sounded like a threat, Apex Holdings. I typed Apex Holdings into the search bar. The results were different. The website wasn't glossy. It was stark, minimalist, and intimidating. There were no smiling faces. And on the Our Team page, I saw him. It was the man from the alley. His picture was there, a cold professional headshot. He had the eyes of a shark. His name was Silas Thorne. Now I had him. I opened one final search tab. I typed in Andre Holloway and Silas Thorne, and the fortress crumbled. I found public records, liens against Andre's assets, high-interest loan agreements with staggering penalty clauses. I saw the numbers, the strings of zeros that represented the hole my son had dug for himself. It was a debt so large, so crushing, it made me feel sick. I finally understood. The fake watch, the imitation handbag, the desperate need to keep up appearances. They weren't just living beyond their means, they were being hunted. Silas Thorne was the hunter, and my son was his prey. And the price for my son's freedom, the collateral for his mountain of lies, was my home, my house, Annette's house. The only real thing we had left in this world. The last piece of the puzzle clicked into place. I turned off the tablet, and the small bathroom was plunged into darkness. I sat there on the edge of the tub for a long, long time alone with the truth. The shock was gone. The sadness was gone. All that was left was a cold, hard clarity. I knew what I was up against. And I knew with absolute certainty what I had to do. I sat there in the pitch-black bathroom, the cold of the porcelain tub seeping into my old bones. But I didn't feel it. I was seeing it all with a terrible new clarity, a complete picture woven together from whispers in a pub, documents on a screen, and the feel of a fake leather handbag. It wasn't a simple story of a greedy son trying to cheat his old father. It was uglier than that. It was a story of fear. I saw Andre, my brilliant son, flying too close to the sun. I saw him making promises he couldn't keep gambling with other people's life savings, with the futures of widows and retired teachers. I saw the moment it all came crashing down, the collapse of that tech fund, the ensuing panic. And then I saw the shark circling in the water. Silas Thorne. He didn't just offer loans, he offered a lifeline that was secretly a noose. My son, terrified and ashamed, grabbed it. He made a deal with the devil to hide his failure. The fancy car, the sterile White House, Brooks' online fantasy life. It was all a desperate performance. It was a show to convince the world and maybe themselves that they were still winning even as the water rose around their necks. They weren't masterminds. They were terrified children trapped in an expensive prison of their own making. And my house, my real, solid, paid-for house, was the ransom. It was the price to keep the shark from eating them alive. This realization didn't make me forgive him. No, the betrayal was too deep, too calculated for that, but it changed the shape of my anger. I wasn't just fighting against my son's greed anymore. I was fighting against his weakness, his cowardice, the moral rot that had set in when he chose to sacrifice his own father to save himself from the consequences of his actions. He was a cornered animal, and cornered animals are the most dangerous. He was no less of a threat, but he was also a tragedy. My son wasn't a monster. He was just a weak man who had made a monster's choice, and I, his father, was the one who would have to face it. The first sliver of dawn was painting the window gray when I called Imani again. I didn't sleep. Sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford. She answered on the first ring, her voice alert, as if she had been waiting. Ike, what is it? I know why he's doing it, Imani. I said, my voice a low whisper. It's worse than we thought. It's not just greed. I spent the next 10 minutes laying it all out for her. The collapsed tech fund, the ruined investors, Apex Holdings, Silas Thorne, the mountain of debt. I told her about the fake watch and the stack of final notices hidden in the junk drawer. I painted a picture of the desperate, hollow life my son had built. She listened without interruption, a skill that made her a brilliant lawyer and an even better friend. When I was finished, the only sound was her quiet, steady breathing. So, he's not just a liar, she said finally, her voice hard. He's a cornered animal. That's more dangerous. Much more dangerous. What are our options, I asked. Legally, we have him dead to rights, Ike, she explained. What he's doing is called elder financial abuse. With the quitclaim deed as evidence and the context of his debt, we could build a criminal case for fraud. He could go to prison. A long time. Prison. The word hit me like a physical blow. Despite the rage, despite the betrayal, the thought of my only son behind bars, it was a pain I couldn't bear. He had destroyed my trust, but he was still my blood. He was still Annette's boy. No, I said the word coming out before I even had a chance to think. No prison. I won't do that to him. There has to be another way. A way to stop him, to save the house without destroying what's left of him. There was another long silence on the line. I could almost hear Imani thinking, weighing the legal chess moves. If we don't use the threat of criminal charges, Ike, our leverage is limited, she said gently. He holds the emotional cards. He's your son. Her words were a dead end, and for a moment I felt a wave of despair. But then a memory surfaced, pushing through the fog of my anger and exhaustion. It was a memory of Annette and her final week sitting on our porch. She was frail, but her eyes were as clear as ever. She had taken my hand. Ike, she'd said, her voice a soft whisper. If Andre ever gets into real trouble, the kind of trouble his pride won't let him admit, there's something you need to know. Under our old bed, the one we bought after we got married, there's an old tin box, full of my grandmother's recipes. But there's something else in there too, my fail-safe. At the time, I had dismissed it as the rambling of a sick woman, a fail-safe. But now, Imani, I said, my voice suddenly alive with a new energy. Annette. She told me something before she passed, about a box, a tin box under our bed. I told her what Annette had said. I didn't know what it meant, but it was a loose thread. And right now it was the only one I had. That afternoon, I put my plan into motion. I shuffled out of my room and found Andre in his home office, staring intently at his computer screen. I leaned against the doorframe, making sure to look a little unsteady on my feet. Son, I said, my voice soft and wistful. I've been thinking about your mother. He turned his professional mask, instantly replaced by one of cautious concern. What about her dad? There are some things, I said, looking off into the distance. Some of her old things, her photo albums. That silly little music box I gave her for our first anniversary. They're still at the house. I feel like I need to see them, to hold them. I let my voice crack just a little on the last word. I watched him carefully. I saw the calculation in his eyes. He thought this was a sign of sentimental weakness, another symptom of my decline. An opportunity. Of course, Dad, he said, his voice smooth as honey. Of course. We can go tomorrow. No, I said a little too quickly. I softened my tone. No, son. I feel like I need to go now. Please. It feels important. He agreed. I knew he would. In his mind, taking the confused old man on a trip down memory lane would only make him more pliable, more willing to sign those papers. The drive to my old neighborhood was quiet. Andre put on some soft jazz, the kind of music no one actually listens to. I stared out the window as the gleaming high-rises and trendy cafes of his world gave way to the familiar brick houses and old oak trees of mine. It's changed a lot, hasn't it? Andre said, breaking the silence. All these old places are being bought up. Property values are going through the roof. You were smart to hold on to your place for so long, Dad. I just nodded. He thought he was talking about real estate, but I heard the real meaning. You were smart to hold on to it for me. Your mother loved this street, I said quietly, not looking at him. She knew every neighbor, every stray cat. She was a great woman, Andre said, the words sounding hollow and rehearsed. She always wanted the best for us. Yes, she did, I replied, turning to look at him for the first time. She was always thinking ahead, always making sure the family was protected. He smiled, completely missing the warning in my voice. He thought I was reminiscing. He had no idea I was telling him his future. When Andre unlocked the front door, the air that hit me was the air of my own life. It was a smell of old wood dust motes dancing in the afternoon sun and the faint lingering scent of Annette's lemon furniture polish. It was the smell of home. After the cold, sterile silence of Andre's house, this silence was different. It was a peaceful silence, a quiet full of memories. Every creak of the floorboards under my feet was a familiar greeting. I saw the faint scratch on the wall where a 7-year-old Andre had crashed his toy truck. I saw the worn spot on the armchair where Annette used to sit and read for hours. This house wasn't just a building. It was a living record of our love, our struggles, our entire world. Andre followed me, looking impatient, checking his phone. He didn't see what I saw. To him, this was just old property, a collection of assets. To me, it was sacred ground. I walked straight to our bedroom. It was exactly as we had left it. The old quilt Annette's grandmother had made was still folded neatly on the bed. The bed itself, the first piece of furniture we ever bought together, looked small and sturdy. It had held us through sickness and health, through arguments and reconciliations for almost 50 years. I didn't hesitate. I got down on my hands and knees, ignoring the sharp protest from my joints. The space under the bed was dark and dusty. I reached my arm into the gloom, my fingers searching. And then I felt it. The cold, smooth metal of the old tin box. It was a simple thing decorated with faded, painted roses. Annette used to keep her grandmother's recipe cards in it. As I pulled it out into the light, my heart was pounding. It felt heavier than I remembered. This box was more than just memories. It was a message from the past. It was Annette's last move in a game she knew we might one day have to play. It was her failsafe. I sat on the floor of our old bedroom, the dust motes dancing in the sunbeams around me. My fingers trembled slightly as I lifted the rusty latch on the tin box. A scent rose up to meet me, the smell of old paper and dried herbs, the faint ghost of cinnamon. It was Annette's scent. On top was just what I expected, hundreds of her grandmother's recipe cards written in a beautiful looping cursive script that had faded over the decades. I ran my thumb over a card for gingerbread, a smudge of ancient flour still visible in the corner. For a moment, a wave of grief so powerful it almost knocked me over washed through me. This was her. This was the woman I loved. I carefully lifted the stack of cards out to set them aside, and underneath my breath caught in my throat. It didn't belong. It was a thick manila folder, crisp and official, a stark contrast to the faded personal history of the recipes. There was no label on the outside. My heart began to beat a slow, heavy drum against my ribs. I opened it. The first page was a wall of dense legal text. Most of it was a blur of words I didn't understand. But then my eyes focused, and certain phrases jumped out clear as day. The Annette Holloway Heritage Trust. And below that, irrevocable. I flipped the page. My eyes scanned the lines, searching, and then I found it. The property located at 14 Elm Street. My house. It was all there in black and white, signed by Annette, and a notary public dated 5 years ago, just after her diagnosis. I read the key paragraph 3 times to make sure my eyes weren't deceiving me. Upon my passing, the property was not to be inherited by our son. It was to be donated in its entirety to a registered community land trust with the express purpose of developing affordable housing for local families. I leaned back against the bed, the papers rattling in my hand, and a slow smile spread across my face. It wasn't a happy smile. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated awe. Annette. My quiet, gentle Annette. She had seen it. Years ago, she had seen this potential for darkness, this weakness in our son, and she had built an ark to protect us from the flood she knew might come. This wasn't an act of doubt. It was an act of profound, unbreakable love. My son was trying to sell a property that he could never, ever own. He was trying to steal a ghost. And in my hand, I held my wife's final, brilliant move. I held the checkmate. When I walked back into Andre's house, I was carrying a dusty photo album and Annette's little music box. I placed them on the table props from my performance. Andre and Brooke looked at me, their expressions a mixture of pity and impatience. They thought the trip had softened me up, drowned me in a wave of nostalgia that would make me easier to manage. They had no idea that I had just come from arming myself for war. I was quiet during dinner. I ate my food slowly, methodically. I even complimented Brooke on her cooking, which was another bland, colorless dish that tasted of nothing. My calmness seemed to unsettle them more than my previous feigned confusion. They kept exchanging glances, trying to figure out what had changed. They probably thought I had finally reached a state of peaceful resignation, that I had accepted my fate as a forgetful old man who needed to be taken care of. After the plates were cleared, I folded my hands on the table. I've been thinking. I said, my voice even and clear. You're right, son. It's time for me to stop worrying about these things. I'm ready to sign the papers. A wave of relief washed over Andre's face. It was so obvious it was almost comical. He shot a triumphant look at Brooke, a silent celebration. The finish line was in sight. That's great, Dad, he said, his voice oozing with false sincerity. I'm so glad you see we're just trying to help. I do, I said, looking him straight in the eye, but I have 2 conditions. The smile on his face tightened just a little. Conditions. I'm an old man, Andre, I said with a small self-deprecating shrug. I do things the old-fashioned way. I want my lawyer to be there when I sign, just to look everything over, make sure all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. A formality, you understand. He relaxed immediately. Of course. A senile old man asking for a lawyer was perfectly in character. It was a meaningless gesture, a final, feeble attempt to feel in control. Of course, Dad. Whatever makes you comfortable, he said magnanimously. And the second thing, this partner of yours, I said, the man who put together this wonderful investment for me. I'd like to meet him. I want to be there to personally thank him for helping our family. I want to shake his hand. Andre beamed. My request was the ultimate validation of his scheme. Not only was his senile father agreeing to sign, but he was also asking to thank the man who was helping to rob him. The arrogance, the sheer blinding pride was written all over his face. He saw a closing ceremony, a final victory lap. He didn't see the jaws of the trap closing around him. Absolutely, Dad, he said. I'll arrange a meeting at his office for tomorrow. That's a wonderful idea. He stood up, looking pleased with himself, the perfect picture of the dutiful son. He had no idea he had just agreed to personally escort his executioner to his own hanging. The office of Silas Thorne was exactly what I expected. It was on the top floor of a glass skyscraper that looked down on the rest of the city. The room was cold, not just in temperature, but in spirit. There was a huge mahogany desk, a wall of windows, and nothing personal. No family photos, no clutter. It was the sterile den of a predator. We arrived first. Andre strode in like he owned the place, a broad, confident smile on his face. Brooke was beside him, dressed in a sharp white suit, looking like a woman who had just won the lottery. They were buzzing with a nervous, triumphant energy. They thought this was their coronation. I shuffled in behind them, leaning a little on my cane, playing my part to the very end. I looked around the big, intimidating room with wide, slightly confused eyes. Silas Thorne entered a moment later. He was exactly as I remembered from the alley, tall, impeccably dressed, with eyes that didn't just look at you, they assessed you. He shook Andre's hand with a slick, practiced charm. Andre, a pleasure, he said, his voice a low, smooth purr. And this must be the man of the hour. He turned his shark-like smile on me. Andre laughed. Dad, this is Mr. Thorne, the man who is helping us secure your future. I just nodded slowly, looking up at him from under my brow. The last to arrive was Amani. She walked in, and the entire atmosphere of the room shifted. She wasn't smiling. She carried a worn leather briefcase and wore a simple dark suit. She radiated a quiet, unshakable authority that made Thorne's expensive office seem cheap. She nodded curtly at Thorne and Andre, then came and stood beside my chair. The two sides were assembled. On one side of the vast desk sat Andre and Brooke, overflowing with arrogance and greed. On the other side sat Amani and me, armed with nothing but the truth. The air was thick with unspoken words, with lies and anticipation. The storm was here. It was time for the lightning to strike. Silas Thorne sat back in his enormous leather chair and steepled his fingers. He looked at Andre with a smug, proprietary air. Well then, he began, his voice smooth as oil. Shall we get to the pleasant business at hand? We have before us a simple quit-claim deed, a formality to transfer Mr. Holloway's primary residence into his son's care for asset management. Andre, if you could just pass the documents to your father. Andre reached eagerly for the papers Thorne was pushing across the desk. But before his fingers could touch them, Amani placed her hand flat on the folder, stopping it. That won't be necessary, she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the room's atmosphere like a surgeon's scalpel. Andre froze, his hand hovering in the air. Brooke's perfect smile faltered. Thorne raised a single questioning eyebrow. I'm sorry, he said. Amani ignored him. She opened her own worn briefcase and pulled out a single thick folder. It was the manila folder from Annette's tin box. She placed it on the desk with a soft, definitive thud. We seem to have a misunderstanding about the ownership of the property in question, Amani said, her eyes fixed on Andre. My client, Mr. Holloway, cannot sign a quitclaim deed for the property at 14 Elm Street for a very simple reason. He doesn't own it. The change in Andre's face was a slow, agonizing spectacle. First there was confusion, a slight furrowing of his brow. He looked at me as if I was the source of this bizarre joke. Then, as Amani opened the folder, the confusion curdled into disbelief. His mouth opened slightly. He was about to speak to dismiss this as senile nonsense, but Imani began to read. The Annette Holloway Heritage Trust. She read, her voice ringing with clarity. An irrevocable trust established 5 years ago. The sole asset of this trust is the property located at 14 Elm Street. Andre's face went white. Not pale, but a bloodless, ghastly white. The confident, successful son vanished, replaced by a terrified boy caught in a lie. He stared at the papers, then at me, his eyes wide with a dawning, sickening horror. Brooke didn't understand the legal terms, but she understood the look on her husband's face. The triumphant sparkle in her eyes died. Andre, she whispered, her voice a thin thread of sound. What is she talking about? Silas Thorne was no longer smiling. The mask of the charming businessman had dropped completely. His eyes, which had been lazily confident, were now narrowed, cold, and intensely focused on the documents in Imani's hands. The shark had smelled blood, but it wasn't mine. He looked at Andre, and for the first time I saw a flicker of genuine predatory anger. He had been played. Imani didn't look at Thorne. She didn't look at Brooke. She looked only at Andre, the boy she had known since he was in diapers. What this means, Andre, she said, her voice devoid of any pity, is that this house has not belonged to your father for the last 5 years. It belongs to a trust your mother created to protect the family's legacy. Your father cannot give you what he does not have. You are trying to sell a house that was never yours to begin with. The silence that followed was so complete, I could hear the faint hum of the city traffic 50 floors below. Andre was frozen, his face a mask of utter devastation. But Imani was not finished. She let the silence hang in the air for a long, painful moment before she delivered the final crushing blow. You see, she said, her voice dropping to a low, icy tone, what you've done here, Andre, is more than just a family squabble. It's more than just a lie. When you knowingly create a fraudulent document, a quitclaim deed for a property you have no legal right to with the intent of using it as collateral to secure a loan. She paused, letting her eyes drift from Andre's shattered face to Silas Thorne's stony one. That's called bank fraud. And when the entity you're trying to defraud is a legally established trust, that elevates the crime significantly. We're no longer talking about a civil matter. We're talking about a federal offense. That was the word that broke the spell. Federal. It was a word that carried weight, a word that meant serious, life-altering consequences. Brooke made a small, wounded sound like a dying animal. No, she whimpered. No. But it was Silas Thorne who reacted first. The shark had been circling, and now it attacked. He shot up from his chair, his calm, collected demeanor completely gone. It was replaced by a raw, unrestrained fury. His face was dark with rage. I have no part in this, he snarled, his voice a low growl. He pointed a trembling finger at Andre, who flinched as if he had been struck. This little worm came to me. He swore the house was his. Free and clear. He brought me forged documents, a fake appraisal. He lied to me. Thorne looked at Imani, his eyes blazing. I am the victim here. I was deceived. The chaos erupted. Brooke started sobbing, loud, ugly sobs that had none of the performative grace of her online persona. This was real, gut-wrenching despair. Andre, tell them it's not true, she cried. Tell them. But Andre couldn't speak. He just sat there, slumped in his chair, a completely broken man. The illusion of success, the carefully constructed facade he had spent years building, had been obliterated in less than 5 minutes. He looked small, pathetic. All the fight was gone. Thorne paced the room like a caged tiger. This is a disaster, he spat, running a hand through his perfect hair. He wasn't talking to us, he was talking to himself. A federal case, my firm's reputation, destroyed. He whirled on Andre again. You stupid, stupid little man. Did you really think you could get away with this? Did you think I wouldn't find out? I watched it all unfold, a silent observer in the storm I had created. I felt no joy. I felt no triumph. Seeing my son crumble, seeing his life detonate before my eyes was the most painful thing I had ever witnessed. But as I looked at the wreckage, at the sobbing wife and the ruined predator, I knew this had to happen. This was the only way. The poison had to be drawn out. The lies had to be burned away. This was the terrible, necessary price for the truth. This was the payoff. All eyes were on Andre and Thorne, but my attention went to Brooke. She was the one who broke first. The sobs that had started as whimpers escalated into a full-blown hysterical breakdown. This was not the quiet, dignified sorrow she posted about online. This was the raw, ugly sound of a world ending. Her meticulously applied makeup began to run, carving black streaks down her pale cheeks. Her perfect white suit, the symbol of her manufactured success, now looked like a costume for a tragedy. Our trip to Aspen, she wailed, her voice cracking. The words were nonsensical, but they revealed everything. She wasn't crying for her husband's betrayal or my pain. She was crying for the loss of her lifestyle, for the vacations, the handbags, the likes, the followers. She was crying for the death of her brand. My followers, my brand partnerships, everything. She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking violently. It's all gone. It's all ruined. She looked up at Andre, but there was no love in her eyes, only a furious, burning accusation. You promised me, she shrieked, her voice shrill. You promised me everything was fine. You liar. The entire image she had built, the curated fantasy of a perfect life, had been set on fire in this cold, sterile office, and she was screaming from inside the flames. It was a complete and total collapse, not of a person, but of a persona, and it was a pitiful, devastating sight to behold. Amid the chaos, I slowly got to my feet. The cane I had been leaning on now felt like a king's scepter. Every eye in the room turned to me. The anger, the sobbing, the panic, it all went quiet. I didn't look at Thorne. I didn't look at Brooke. I looked at my son. He was still slumped in the chair, a hollowed-out version of the man he pretended to be. He wouldn't meet my gaze. He just stared at the polished floor as if it held the answers to his ruined life. Your mother, I began, and my voice was quiet, but it filled the room. Your mother always saw the best in you, Andre, even when you couldn't see it in yourself. She knew you had a good heart, but she also knew your pride. Your fear of failure could lead you down a dark path. I took a step closer, standing over him, not as a victor, but as a father. She didn't create that trust to punish you. She created it to protect you. She knew this world of easy money and fake success could swallow you whole. She was trying to protect the family's legacy, Andre. And that legacy isn't a house. It's not a number in a bank account. It's about integrity. It's about knowing the difference between what's real and what's just for show. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my old worn wallet. I took out a single crumpled business card and placed it on the table in front of him. It was the card for the director of the Community Land Trust, the organization that now owned our home. She left you an opportunity, son, I said softly. A way back. You could go to them, offer to help, swing a hammer. Learn what it really means to build something real with your own two hands. Not for money, not for show, for your own soul. The choice is yours. I didn't need to press charges. I didn't need to see him in jail. The world he had built for himself was already his prison. I had just handed him the key. Whether he chose to use it was up to him. Without another word, I turned and walked toward the door. Amani followed, her hand resting briefly on my shoulder. I didn't look back at the wreckage I was leaving behind, the crying, the yelling, the shattered illusions. I walked out of that cold glass tower and into the afternoon sun. For the first time in a very long time, I felt at peace. I hadn't destroyed my son. I had protected my wife's legacy. I had defended my dignity. Order had been restored. And that was a victory worth more than any house or any amount of money. This experience taught me one final lesson, a lesson from my wife, Annette. A family's true legacy isn't the property or the money you leave behind, but the integrity and wisdom you protect for the future. My son was drowning in a world of fake success, and in his desperation he tried to pull me under with him. I learned that sometimes the greatest act of love isn't shielding your children from their mistakes, but forcing them to confront a hard and painful truth. I had to protect our real legacy, one built on dignity, from the illusion of wealth that can destroy a family from the inside out. Let me know in the comments what you would have done in my shoes.